Humans. Humans on the mix. It's cool to be I'm getting it together at 6 o'clock.
All right, all right. Thanks for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Are you you in New Orleans?
Yes, I am.
When I think about your music and where you're coming from, obviously New Orleans music you're so central to that, just central to what that music means to people outside of the city. And I wonder what is New Orleans music to you, both in the spiritual sense and then also in a practical way. What makes it what it is, which is so different than every other subgenre that comes out of the United States? It's the seed of everything, and it still feels so fresh and so different. Can you shed some light on what makes it like that?
I get asked that all the time, and I don't think I ever been able really to nail the fact, because, first of all, we have so many different musical communities that contribute, contribute to the New Orleans music scene.
Right.
So the question would be is what music scene are you talking about?
Let's start with you. When you were growing up, what was the New Orleans music that was important to you?
When I was growing up, very much different from today's young players that's coming out. When I was growing up, I was schooled, by the old guys, and the old guys, I played a gig with Frank Moulton and Walter Washington, or the Lasty Brothers and stuff. That gig would consist of playing, anything from bebop to swing to R&B to which would grew into be called funk later,
Right.
The Iko kind of feeling music and the street stuff, the Indian grooves and all that kind of stuff. Well, we played all of that music. I played the first hour and a half of that gig. We were playing pretty much like swing and and shuffles and stuff like that. And then the second hour of the gig, we would kind of move it into the R&B stuff and some of the Earl King and the Ernie Cato kind of stuff.
Right.
And then the third set was all hell broke loose. We would be head over heels into that Night Ward movement for Fats Domino and Jesse Hill and the Ooh Poopy Doos and that kind of stuff, the Icos. And that's like I said, but during the course of that 3.5 hours, because when I was a kid, the gigs were 3.5 hours, not like it is today where, some of the guys are playing just, 2 75-minute sets or maybe 2 90-minute sets,
Right. How'd you start playing bass?
Well, I started playing bass because there were too many good guitar players around. I still say to today I'm a frustrated guitar player, because that was my instrument, guitar. But I was a rhythm guitar player, and I never was a lead player. Back then there was a need for lead players more than rhythm players. And I just wasn't that good.
You play guitar ever? You still play a little guitar?
Oh, I still play guitar, yeah. In fact, I'm looking at my guitar. I'm looking at my acoustic guitar sitting right next to me.
Nice. Have you ever lived outside the city?
Well, after Katrina, my wife and I are buying some property with a house on it out in the country.
Oh, okay.
That in Darrow, Louisiana.
All right.
We don't own it yet. I have to get a couple more gigs, and it'll be mine.
How long have you known Zigaboo?
Since he and I was, I think about 12 and 13 or 14 and 15, something like that. Maybe a little younger. It might have been like 10 and 11 or 12, something like that. His older brother, Clinton, was my piano teacher around the age of, that was before I started playing guitar. So that was, I was 7 and he was 6.
Wow. Wow.
So I started playing guitar when I was 10. Oh, okay. So no, that would have been 8 or 9, something like that.
Okay.
And I got my guitar for my 10th birthday, I believe it was.
And when did you guys start playing music together?
When I moved up into the 13th ward, Zig had already been living up there, and I hadn't seen him in probably 6-7 years, maybe, or maybe not, a little longer than that. We were both into our teens by now.
Okay.
And when I moved up there on Coliseum Street off of Valence Street, Zig was living in a house on the corner of Valence and Coliseum. In fact, it's the same home that Art lives in today.
Oh wow!
And Art and the Neville family. Art was living around the corner on Chestnut Street. His mom and dad was still living on Valence in that middle block between Zig's house and on Art's house, between Coliseum and Chestnut. So when I moved into that neighborhood, I had my little acoustic guitar, and Zig and used to, I met when I got to meet some of the younger brothers, Cyril, and some of the other guys. We would go in Zig's backyard, on his little side yard, and him and Cyril would be beating on boxes and we didn't have cowbells. We had bottles and cans and stuff like that, and we'd just be back in the backyard jamming, So we had to be somewhere in the neighborhood of around 15, 16, something like that. I hadn't remembered that story in a long time. But
that's cool,
but
man.
The nightmare of that it lasted for probably a couple of months. But the lady behind Zig's house, this lady, she was annoyed by the fact that we were back there playing and singing and beating on boxes and cowbells, beating on boxes and cans and bottles. And she called the police on us one day, and the police was very, very, they weren't very nice about it, and they actually one of them put his foot into my guitar and just crushed it.
Oh, damn.
And so it was a very long time before I actually got an instrument. After that, we had moved away from the neighborhood and was living uptown on Camberone Street now. And when I was reunited with Herbert Wing and Papi, which was the bass player whose grandfather I met Papi and his grandfather, when I was going to guitar lessons when I was 10 years old, and I seen him and his grandfather playing on the steps in front of their house, and they would be playing, Papi would be playing a bass. He would be playing bass on a guitar that only had 4 strings on it.
All right.
And his grandfather would be playing, the guitar. They would be playing, all these old classical blues songs, St. Louis blues, and all that great old music. And I was taking guitar lessons from a guy named Hamilton Brown on Galvez Street, so I had to pass Papi and them house. Well, that was by accident, actually, because I didn't have to pass the house. Because just one day, I decided to not catch the bus at Perdita and Galvez, but walk to Tulane and Galvez, which is 2 blocks over. And I took a shortcut. I went around the corner, and when I turned to go towards Galvez on Garevia Street, when I turned that corner, I heard the music. I kind of moved slowly and listened, and as I was passing, I saw Papi and his grandfather. I had been taking lessons for over a year and a half now, and I saw Papi and his grandfather playing, and I saw his grandfather playing with the classical hand movement, the classical formula for the right hand. And I was studying classical formula at the class that I was going to, but I was playing country music. I was playing cowboy songs,
right.
Red River Valley and, Home, Home on the Range and those kind of songs. And I saw his grandfather playing, St. Louis Woman and stuff like that, using that same formula. I said, man, that's what I want to play. So it was like, that's kind of. I think I got away from your question, though.
Nah, that's all right. That's good, man. That's the best answer. I spend a lot of time listening to New Orleans music, and I love it more than anything else. But when I listen to the Meters, it's sort of something fundamentally different about that than not only other New Orleans stuff that I know that was sort of contemporary, but definitely anything else that was happening at the time. Not only is it instrumental music primarily, but like there's sort of a feeling about it that's very different. And I guess it's kind of like my New Orleans question, but like, were there other bands like y'all? Other bands that were kind of in your same genre or in the same kind of feeling? Or when y'all got together and started doing your thing, was it sort of different than anything that was around at the time?
Well, I think at the time when we started playing and, really functioning as a body, there may have been one other band in the city that could be considered a syncopated band, and that band was at the time. It was Russell Baptiste's father's band. It was the Baptiste Brothers.
Okay.
That was sort of kind of syncopated, thing. But all the Indian pockets, the street stuff, all of that, they weren't bands then. They were just like tribes. They were just
right.
a group of people with cowbells and singing and chanting, but they had that same syncopation. No, as far as bands, I believe there weren't any other bands. Now, later on, we're talking about the late '60s. Early on in the '70s, there were a few of the young players by now that that guys like Ivan and some of his crew, some of the guys, the Gerald Tillmans and Ivan, Nick Daniels, and all those guys. When they first started playing as a band. They kind of, I think they were calling themselves the Uptown All-Stars, I believe, at one time. Then there was a young group that eventually became the Neville Brothers' first house band, the first band that played behind the Neville Brothers. The band was called Blackmail. And those guys had a really, really good handle on syncopated pockets, that like the Meters had. They was probably, I thought they was probably the best syncopated band in town, other than the Meters at the time. But this was like the early '70s. Right.
Now, that's an interesting phrase. I've never heard it quite used like that, like syncopated band. Do you mean like what would later become known as like funk music? I mean, do you mean it like that?
Yeah, that was absolutely what I think that was kind of related. Although there's funk music at this point. I believe it has many titles.
Right.
It's funk music, but there's many forms or styles of funk was funky, and I've never been a big fan of the labels because it always just seemed labels have always just seemed to be something that held black musicians back from getting paid. But because the guys out of Memphis and Georgia, the James Browns, they call James Brown music funky, and they always just say that the stuff that Maceo and those guys were playing, the horn parts that was playing behind Jams. Jams, the rhythm section was straight ahead pocket, hard pockets. There wasn't no syncopation in the pockets that the band played. There was syncopation in what the horns played. Right. And the horn players were playing, but the bands, they were playing a straight ahead pocket thing. And some of the other things, like groups like Sly Stone, they had a straight ahead pocket too. But the syncopation that they did in their music was what the horns did, And maybe some of the guitar stuff was, had some of those movements, But bass and drums was straight ahead,
Right. That's different than how y'all played.
Yeah, that's different from where me and Zig, we played open notes and we played stuff that had holes and big gaps in the space, that allowed Leo and Art to have to do things that so that was what's called syncopation and not playing on one. We used to play off of the beat. We used to play and one or we would play a note before one. So. You know, it was always that kind of that offbeat kind of feeling and stuff. You know,
Right.
that's what I call syncopation. I mean, one of the music theorists might call it something else.
Well,
getting there too early.
Yeah, yeah. So this isn't a meter track, but y'all certainly played on it. Do you remember the Betty Harris track "Breaking the Road"?
Oh yeah. I haven't heard that in 100 years, but yes, I do. I remember recording that.
Okay, that might be one of my favorite pieces of recorded music ever.
No kidding.
I mean, it's I think it's as special as anything that's ever been recorded. And could you tell me a little bit about making that track? I think the rhythm section track on that tune is just I don't know, it's out of this world, man. It's nothing. There's nothing like that.
Without hearing it, you know, I can't wrap my head around what that sounds like. You know, I do remember the song. I remember recording that stuff with her. And
I'll have to get back up with you then.
I kind of remember. I believe that we may have recorded, like, I don't think we did a whole record. I think we made just 4 tracks or something with her.
Okay.
I don't remember how that actually went down, because there was another artist that was in this that was there at the time when a gentleman from Texas, I believe. I can't remember what his name was, but I kind of remember they did a 45, and his song was on one side and hers was on the other side.
So you guys obviously did a lot of recording with Allen Toussaint. What was he like as a producer, and how were those sessions run? What was his interaction with you guys, and where was y'all's sort of freedom to generate rhythm section parts on your own? What was that?
We weren't as free to generate. A lot of the bass lines and the drum parts were dictated. Leo had a little free hand, and Art always had a free hand. Alan never told Art what to play. You know, he said, you know, Art just going to play what he's going to play. He's never ever gotten, you know, and Art's, you know, thing about what Art was playing. You know, he just let him play, and but Zig and my almost every song that we recorded with Alan, if you listen at the piano, my bass line is in his left hand. You hear it every time.
And how was, just in terms of like the rhythm of like how it worked in the studio? Were these like takes that you were working a long time on, and Alan was very particular about stuff, or was it kind of like in the?
Oh yeah, he was very adamant about sticking to what you were told to play, because, you know, I mean, well, and I understand now, and I didn't quite understand back then, but I understand now, is that, you know, because he was hearing the whole session.
Right.
And you know, when we were cutting these tracks, those artists that we were recording for, like Betty Harris, she wasn't in the studio when we did those tracks. You know, we just did the tracks. And he knew what she was going to sing and where it was going to go. So he was, you know, that's the reason why he had us. You know, what we played was very strict to the point, because. You know, he didn't want us to play or say something that's going to be in the way of her vocals, you know.
Right.
Or the Lee Dorsey's vocals, or, you know, whoever that particular artist was. I believe maybe the only person that might have been in the studio when we did and then Alan wasn't in the studio that much when we did the Robert Palmer record.
Oh, okay.
The Sneaker Salad Through the Alley project. We know it was just Robert and us in the studio. Alan was sitting upstairs in his office listening to what we were doing, because his office was wired to the studio, and he could actually plug in if he wanted to plug in and play with us at the time while we was playing from his studio, you know.
Oh wow!
I mean, from his office, because he had a capacity that ran tracks, probably had a half dozen tracks that came from his studio, from his office right into the studio, and his grand piano up there in the room.
That's wild.
That was a session that, you know, it was like a nightmare for me, and more of a nightmare when the record came out and he didn't even mention our names.
Oof, that's tough. That's tough, man. Did you So back to the Meters a bit. How did y'all compose? How did y'all compose that music? Was that just sort of y'all in the room, kind of working out riffs and forms and stuff like that, or was someone bringing something to the table a little bit more? How did it come about?
The first three records was sort of like that. Yeah, Leo would come in with a riff, and Zig would come in with a riff. Zig would come in with a drum pattern, and we were just trying to riff on top of his drum pattern and make sense of things. It wasn't until we started recording the Cabbage Alley record and everything after that where the individuals, songwriters started emerging that wanted to claim rights to the songs that they wrote and stuff. So that's when the session, the way the music was recorded changed.
Right. Is there sort of a behind the scenes business narrative to the fact that over the course of the Meters discography, like it becomes more song based and more vocal based and that kind of stuff? Was that trying to interface with the popular music industry a little bit more? Or
Absolutely. I believe that the primary songwriters, meaning Nocentelli and Zigaboo, or Joseph Madalis, I believe that both of those guys, were very in tune into what was being played on the radio. I wasn't. I didn't listen to other music. I really didn't. When I was going to listen to music, it was either classical music or either jazz. That's what I listened to. I didn't listen to the James Browns and the Sly Stones and the. I did. I loved Curtis Mayfield and I loved Earl King. So I listened to New Orleans music more than anything else.
Right.
But the music that was at that time that was considered the top 50 or the top 100
right,
in the Billboard magazines and stuff. Half that music I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't tell you one name from another one. If I heard the song, I couldn't tell you who it was.
Right.
And that's even the way my life is today. I still don't listen to the radio. But Zig and Leo both, man, were very in tune to and stuff. And we played with groups out there. We had like the Maurice White and those guys. They opened a show for us when they was in school in Tuscaloosa. They opened the show for us, and then a year later, those guys had short records,
Right.
And I believe that the primary songwriters in the Meters, saw that happening more times than a little, and thought that, man, this, we had, truthfully, and we had an Art Neville in the band. We had a wonderful singer in the band, and his vocals was not being utilized, So
Right.
both Zig and Leo was writing songs for Art to sing. They wanted Art to sing.
Right. You guys were a backing band for Alan in New Orleans. Were other producers using you guys, or like nationally, were there producers coming in that were interested in y'all as a unit, or was it mainly through Alan?
No, I think we were like off limits. I don't think nobody can get to us if they didn't go through Alan.
Okay.
Marshall Sehorn was our at that time hands-on manager.
Okay.
And yeah, you can, actually for a long time, even when we signed that record deal with Warner Brothers, to start doing the Cabbage Alley album, the record label actually thought that Alan was in the band.
Right, okay.
And because that's where, because at the time when we were sold to Warner Brothers, we were sold as a package. Alan Toussaint and the Meters, it was sold as a package to one, and it was a big disappointment with Warner Brothers when they found out that wasn't the case. But we were doing records, and they always thought that Alan was in the studio working with us, and when they found out that, I think through some interview or something that one of us might have dared to say it. And it could have been me that, because I used to always say that, Alan was never in the studio with us whenever we were recording. He left us to our own devices, which I thought was, it could have been the one and only reason why, we didn't do that short record, because, we lacked, some sort of direction and a lot of stuff we were doing. so much things that we were doing, kind of took and mimicked some of the stuff we had already done, So,
Right.
so it was, I thought that if Alan Toussaint might have been in the studio giving us some direction, we may have done something more memorable in the chart world. But
Oh man.
that's my wife calling me. I'm supposed to be taking her to the doctor. Hold on a second, please.
Okay.
Debbie, are you ready to go?
It's been a real pleasure. Just so you know, kind of a personal musician to musician level, your music and what you guys did is just incredibly important to me and how I've learned about how music works and what I think is important in music and it's just I couldn't say enough about how thankful I am for what you've made. It's really changed my life. So thank you for that. And
I appreciate that.
And it's been a pleasure talking. And maybe I'll see you down the road sometime, man.
All right.
A Space Bomb production.